Hello, Nerd Herd, and welcome back to another episode of the NerdCast. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've been well. Today's episode, we will be discussing nerds and nerd culture as a whole, how it's changed, what it means to be a nerd, and things of that nature. I feel like this is a topic that doesn't really get discussed often, and I feel like it's changed a lot over the years, because in the past, you would hear, like, nerd and think of it as more of, like, an insult. You know, Poindexter is somebody who's too, just is too studious, and all they do is study and talk about schoolwork and stuff like that, and those old school, like, the shows like Saved by the Bell, they had all the nerdy characters that wore the bow ties and the glasses, and they were hunched over and carrying around their books and stuff, which I don't think there's anything wrong with, because there's nothing wrong with being academic. But I think now, when you hear that term and you think of, what is a nerd, it's somebody who's passionate. It's somebody that feels a connection to a community and feels like, I really love this comic book series or this video game series or, what have you. I'm a video game nerd. I'm a film buff nerd, stuff like that. So, I don't know. I feel like it's changed for the better. What do you agree? Or do you feel like there's still part of it that kind of has like a negative connotation?
I don't think there's a negative connotation anymore, because I think it's all popular culture. So, I mean, like, the things that people nowadays will say is, like, nerd culture isn't like this. It's the same stuff.
It's not niche anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same stuff that we, like, got made fun of. I don't know if you did, but I always got made fun of for, like, the superheroes and science fiction and all of that stuff. And I think that now has become so popular that it's no longer something to make fun of someone for. It's just kind of like the mainstream, and everyone has adopted an interest in that sort of thing. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of evolved for the better. Certainly, if no one's getting bullied for it anymore, that's better.
Absolutely.
But I think it also kind of takes away what made it kind of special in the beginning, which is that you had that small community that was really passionate about those things, instead of now having, like, everyone who, like, watches Marvel movies and, like, oh, they're in nerd culture now. They didn't grow up, like, reading comic books or, having a favorite superhero, but now they're involved, and now they feel ownership over it too. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, everyone has a right to have ownership over these things if they feel invested in them or if they enjoy them. It just feels, I guess I'm a little bitter.
You're a little bitter. Well, I can understand that. I'm a little bitter,
because, like, I was the kid that had, like, the Batman socks and came in with the Star Wars backpack and lunchbox, and, like, kids would, like, and then I was a nerd in other ways too, because I was very academic, and I think that didn't help either. It was like I was, like, the really, like, dorky kid who also had, like, the dorky interests that other people didn't, and it was right at the cusp of when those things started to become, like, not something that, like, your weird cousin in the basement was doing, and, like, what people were actually interested in like, popular culture. So I just kind of missed the mark there when I was in high school. I guess all of that started to kind of have a resurgence. But, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of bitter about it now, because I'm thinking back and I'm like, oh, those are the things that I got made fun of. But, like, those same people who made fun of me for it are, like, acting like they're mega nerds now. Like, they're going to cons and they're, like, watching all of the movies, and now they've, like, sort of embraced the things that they used to make fun of me for. And I guess that kind of makes me, like, kind of bitter about it, because I'm like, well, now that nerd culture is, like, popular, you guys are just into it because it's something that everyone's into.
Well, nerd culture is pop culture now.
Well, yeah, or conversely, that it's become popular and you've discovered that, oh, shoot, maybe I shouldn't have been making fun of this person for that, because it's actually kind of cool. Like, I don't know which way that it went. But yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it for a while, I guess, when all of this really started. And it was probably really when you were in high school that it just became kind of mainstream that all of this stuff was popular.
Even in middle school for me.
Yeah?
I remember, I mean, a lot of my friends were, like, obsessed with Harry Potter, and we would all talk about that and run around outside with sticks pretending they were wands, and
I don't remember
a
Harry
lot of
Potter
my
being
friends
nerd culture, though.
were really into Star Wars. I mean, and it was almost to the point where it was like, you don't like Star Wars? Like, what's wrong with you? What do you mean you don't like Star Wars? Like, that was the vibe in our school, rather than, ew, you like Star Wars? Because it was like, well, who doesn't? Who doesn't like Darth Vader and R2-D2 and stuff like that? Like, well, why would you not like those things? Unless you just weren't a sci-fi person, and then we were like, okay, well, whatever. That's just not your thing. But, like, anybody that openly, like, shit on it, we were like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong with you? But, it just kind of became like, yeah, everybody loves it, you know? Everybody loves Marvel movies, and especially since, 2008 and Iron Man came out, everybody's been on the Marvel movie train. And I think because of that movie, so many more it's become so much more accessible to so many more people, because, like, before that, those movies weren't really good. Like, aside from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, like Elektra and Hulk and Daredevil and Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider's okay, because, be quiet, Alexa, because I love... She's sassy. Because I love Nicolas Cage. But all those movies were, like, kind of bad. So, like, people associated those movies and with comic books and being like, well, it's really... There's nothing to that. There's nothing good about that, so why would I like it? But once, it was quality movies being pumped out, people were like, wow, this is really great. And then the movies make you want to go back and read the comics, because you're like, well, why did Tony do this? Or why did they do that? Or who's this character? And I think, you have levels now of people who are, like, diehard fans, and you have casual fans, and then you have, like, the people that are just going to kind of go and see the movies. And they're all, like, under the same umbrella of nerddom. But I don't know. I don't feel bitter, because I guess I didn't have the same experience that you did. I'm just kind of satisfied with, like, all the people that, I heard, like, were bullied at the time. It's like, well, now we're on top, because all you people that were laughing at us before, you all like this stuff now, and we know so much more about it, than you do. And we're so, right? I mean, we're the authority on it now, so now those people have to come to us and be like, well, who's this and what's that? Well, I mean, you should have been paying attention instead of making fun of me before.
I mean, no, I don't see it that way.
I do. I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think, this stuff should be getting attention, because it's all so cool, and we've been saying it's so cool for years now. Video games, comic books, and graphic novels, and all these movies and characters. Like, to think that Disney, an empire, is practically built now on Marvel and Star Wars. I mean, they're two of their biggest properties, franchises. Like, and before, like, I don't know, Star Wars was kind of a niche thing, and Marvel was just this hidden pocket that, like, was doing worse than DC. Everybody was on the DC train, all those old Batman movies and Superman movies and the TV shows and stuff like that. Why did you say that
with surprise? Worse than DC, like, that was, like...
No, well, I only said it like that because compared to now, Marvel is doing a lot better than DC is in terms of film and, like, media. DC is still, I think, doing better than Marvel in terms of comic books, with how often they pump out new comics and things of that nature. But I think Marvel is starting to gain on them with, like, video games and animated things. Because before, it was just all movies, the MCU. But now they've got, the Guardians game, and the Avengers game is okay. But the What If series is animated and stuff like that. And Kevin Feige said that they were looking to get more into doing animated things going forward. So, now under his command, I feel like we're going to get some good animated TV shows. But I love both companies. I love both groups. I have nothing against DC. I love all those characters. The Flash and Green Lantern are my two favorite DC characters. I would love to see more from them. I have nothing against DC at all. I was just saying it's just surprising, because before, DC was was king. You know, they had all the awesome Batman movies, and those Superman movies were awesome, and loads of TV shows, and all, you know, and they were the kings of the comic. And now Marvel's kind of gaining on them because I feel like they really hit their stride.
I would still say that DC is the king of comic, but it's neither here nor there. I think that
we don't have to agree on that.
I think that what Marvel has harnessed with the help of Disney's money is commercialization. And I think that they've done it more successfully than DC has. And they had a clear vision of what they wanted to do with all of these films. And then they knew how to market it in different ways. And then they've expanded upon their empire based on that. But that was really a matter of just having the right vision and direction and resources in order to do all of those things.
I agree with you that the funding is definitely a big portion of it, but it's also story. I mean...
That's what I just said.
Well, no. You said the vision for where they want to go.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, you can map out how you want these films to fit together, but if each individual film is not good and the story is not strong, it's all going to fall apart, you know? Like how they just tried to do the Snyderverse, starting with the Man of Steel up until the Justice League movie. Like, they had a vision, kind of, but each movie didn't really hold up on its own, so it didn't really make you care about those characters as much. And then when it came time for them to have their big moment, it just didn't feel as built up as it should have been, considering how big these characters are. And the only one you really care about going into the Justice League movie is Wonder Woman, because her movie is the most striking.
Well,
you know?
I mean, we've already had a conversation about all the problems with what Warner Brothers is doing, so I don't...
We'll have to do this for the podcast, though, on a different episode.
You already know how I feel about how they've handled things. It's not, spoiler, it's not great for all of them. I mean, some of those movies I do really genuinely enjoy that Warner Brothers has been in charge of, but I see the same sort of downfalls with what Warner Brothers is doing as I saw with, like, Star Wars, truthfully. Because the original trilogy was great, but you're using those characters that people know and love, and you're doing weird things with them when you go to the prequel trilogy, and they just kind of let George Lucas do whatever he wanted. And I think that Warner Brothers and DC are just kind of letting their directors do whatever they want with those movies, and without having a lot of control over what exactly goes in and making sure that each one ties into something else, if that's what you're going for, like an overall universe that makes sense. I think that you're going to fall flat, and I think that that's part of the problem. I think it's the same issue, and the reason why Star Wars was able to come back from that misstep, and I know you don't agree with me that it was a misstep, but it is what it is because of the commercialization factor, because they had built up those characters so much and marketed them so much that it became bigger than those films alone. It became about the action figures and the lightsaber toys and the myths and the lore and all of that behind it. And it became such a pop culture phenomenon that it didn't matter that they completely messed up those 3 movies, because they were like, well, we'll just toss 3 more. We'll wait like 20 years. So we'll toss a few more at you and we'll see how you feel about it. Well, I guess it wasn't 20 years. What was it, 10 years?
I was going to say, I was in second grade.
It was another decade.
When Revenge of the Sith came out, and then I was
goodness.
I was in high school still when they were talking about Force Awakens.
Well, you're young.
I remember watching... Yeah, it was my senior year when I watched the first teaser trailer with my friends in school.
Oh, boy.
So there's definitely no way it was...
Yeah, okay. It wasn't 20.
It was less than 10.
It was 10 years.
Less.
Less? Okay. Less. But,
no, okay. I guess
I think it was around a decade. It could have been a little bit. Regardless. They were kind of like, people will come back for this, and they built on the nostalgia factor, and they kept promising, like, it'll be better than the prequels. The people who like the original trilogy, it'll be better than that,
Mm-hmm.
And I think they delivered on that promise for the first one, at least. The other 2 are kind of, but the first one was great. But I think that's, you get people to fill the theaters, and you get people to keep coming back when you have, characters that people feel invested in and that they've been introduced to and that they love. And I think that's where Warner Brothers is struggling with the DC characters right now, is that they're trying to appeal to an audience the way that Marvel does. So they're trying to appeal to the Marvel audience, who is now not just comic book fans, but everyone.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're trying to introduce these characters to people who haven't read the comic books, who don't know who they are, that introduces a whole nother challenge, because then you have to like give them the whole backstory, but then you have to explain why they do this and why they have that power and how they tie into all of that. And I realize some of that's just common storytelling, but you can't toss all those characters into a film and expect people to understand and relate to them and know what they're all about if they've never heard of them before. Mm-hmm. And just automatically just, oh, well, we're not even going to tell their story, or we're going to tell their story in a 5-minute snippet, and then that's going to be it. And then we'll have you see them later on as part of an ensemble. That was the problem with the Justice League, is that they did that, and that they were trying to appeal to that common audience instead of appealing to the DC fan base. And we're very loyal. Yes, but we are very loyal fans, the DC fan base. And we're unfortunately a little hurt and skeptical at this point because we've been let down so many times. And I think that that's the problem, you know, and Marvel was able to appeal to the comic book fans, but then make a really good movie that other people enjoyed. Yeah. But they also spent time on each individual character before they put them all together. And that's what I said that they should have done with the DC films.
Could not agree with you more.
You know, yes, Wonder Woman, that was a wonderful movie, and that was the perfect vehicle to introduce her. Batman doesn't really need an introduction at this point because most people know who he is.
Well, Batman's kind of in the same pool that Spider-Man's in. Like, we're sick of seeing the origin story. We're sick of seeing, you know, Uncle Ben die. We're sick of seeing Batman or Bruce Wayne lose his parents outside the opera. Like, just get to it. So, like, the way they did that with Tom Holland and they just moved right into it, like, he's Spider-Man already, let's just go. I think we deserve a Batman movie where he just already is Batman.
Well, I think that...
And there is no, well, this is what happened when he was a kid. Like, let's just get right to it.
Batman with Rob Pattinson, I think that that's kind of going to be the way that they handle it, from what I can see. It looks like it's not so much an origin story. It looks like he's already going to be Batman.
Cool.
Like a younger version of Batman, but he's going to be the character and sort of be living his life and experiencing things. But
I'm very excited for that movie. I think he's going to destroy it. I think he's going to be awesome. That trailer was so good. He beat the crap out of that guy at the end, and he's nailing the raspy Batman voice already. Yeah, it's going to be great. Can't wait. I love
Rob Pattinson. I think that he was a good choice for that character.
And he hasn't gotten to be a superhero yet.
I know.
So good.
He's been a sparkly vampire.
This could open some doors for him.
Maybe. But, and I think the Aquaman movie was very entertaining, too. That movie. And I know that it wasn't, like, critically successful. Not everyone loved the movie, but I still think that it was just a fun superhero movie. And I think that that's what they have to do with some of these characters that people aren't as familiar with, is that you have to just give them their own movie, or introduce them in a show, or do something like that so that people get to know them before you toss them in an ensemble. And they really did them dirty by like just putting them in there and being like, well, this is a character, here's like 5 minutes of backstory, and then you'll know all about them and it'll be fine.
Well, they never really did a whole lot of those movies for the other characters. Like, Warner Brothers always focused on Batman and Superman, and I think there was like one Wonder Woman movie, I forget the actress's name, but the original Wonder Woman movie was like years ago, and it was just those three characters, but there was never a Flash, there was never a Aquaman, a Green Lantern, or Martian Manhunter movie or anything like that, and those characters are all very important. But that's what I think. I know you haven't watched any of it, but I think CW is doing a pretty good job of that. There are definitely some improvements that could be made. I'm not a filmmaker or a TV show producer, so I don't really have any place saying anything. But I think for what they've been doing so far, it's working. Like, the way they connect these characters and have built this little universe on their own, you know, like, every character has their own TV show that they branch off into, but every once in a while they all come together, or one or two of them will meet, and things all kind of fall into place in this very, very nice, neat little puzzle. And it was clear that somebody had a vision, that somebody up top had a vision and then was kind of directing everybody else who got their own show. Like, this is what we're leading to. This is what you should be doing. And I think they could learn from that. What? Why do you make that face?
I mean, because I have seen the shows that you're talking about.
They're so corny, of course. Yeah,
the CW
but like
in general just does everything super corny. Like,
sure,
The Flash and Riverdale. And
okay, but Riverdale is ridiculous. Riverdale thinks it's like a show about superheroes, but it's supposed to be about kids.
But
that
I'm
show's
just saying
ridiculous
that in general,
and
I
extra
feel like
corny.
the CW makes everything corny, and they take like properties and they just make them like kind of silly. That's definitely not what I want.
Green Arrow is not silly. That show is depressing at sometimes.
Well, I just don't. That's not the direction that I would want to see them go into.
I'm not saying that the way that they're doing it is perfect, but I'm just saying the way they've planned it out. Like the way they introduce characters and then they'll do a few episodes with that character on somebody else's show and then that person will get their own show. Mm-hmm. And they don't have an origin story. Their origin story was on that other person's show. So it's all kind of like, you skip all this, it kind of makes sense the way they were introduced, and now we're just jumping right into their own show. And here he is, here's the Flash, you know. They introduced Barry Allen on Green Arrow and then just kind of gave him his own thing, you know. And then he met up with Supergirl, and those two became friends, and she had her own thing, and it was just like, I don't know, it just made sense, and I thought that it worked well. And I think, like, if they had done something of that nature with the DC EU at first, instead of trying to cram that all in later, it would have worked to their benefit, because Superman was on his own. It was the standalone movie. But even in his own standalone movie, nothing was really explained about him, and there wasn't a whole lot of character development. So we didn't really care about him. So you didn't really care about any of the characters until you got to Wonder Woman, who really had the most character development in her story.
Yeah, I mean, the newer DC movies, some of them I really could take or leave. Mm-hmm. And I think that they really just didn't know if what they were making would be successful or not, or if it would be a complete flop. And I think that that's the way that they're walking into all of these films now. It's kind of like one foot in the door and one foot out. Is that, well, you know, if it tanks, then it tanks, and we'll just not do that again. But if it's great, then, ooh, what a surprise. What a wonderful surprise. You know, and I think that that's not the way that you should handle things. You should spend the time, money, and energy to make sure that something is absolutely perfect and that it's going to be a success every single time. And I think that it's definitely possible to do that. You just need to find someone who's willing to be at the helm of all of this.
Yeah.
And they kind of squandered their time with Zack Snyder by taking him off the project and then telling him that he's not going to be working with them again.
They also should have given him they should have given him freedom.
Yeah, I mean, he did cast Ben Affleck as Batman, so that's...
Sure, but I mean, and I don't know how many people would agree with me, but I thought his cut, the Snyder cut, was really good.
But it was too long.
No, but hear me out. Like, imagine that in 2 parts, you know? Like a 2-part, like, big event. But if they had given him the freedom to produce the other movies the way he saw fit to connect to that, his endpoint, it would have been so much better. With, Patty Jenkins still doing Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. I think those two working together, I don't know. I think it would have been great. We finally got Martian Manhunter at the end of his Justice League movie. Mm-hmm. I was so excited to see that. It made me so happy. And, you know, he had plans to do Green Lantern, and I forget, I'm a terrible fan, but I forget the character's name, but Black Green Lantern, who's my favorite version of the character, that's what he wanted to do, you know. I was so excited to see that. He wanted to do something with the Atom, all this cool stuff, and now he's done. Those movies. I don't know if they're going to do it the way he was going to do it. It was all going to connect.
Probably not.
And keep going after Justice League.
And he definitely had a vision.
It was so much better.
But
they could have done with...
It's tough to tell.
Without some of the musical numbers. But.
Sure. It's just tough to tell whether that vision would have been successful. And we haven't seen everything that the executives at Warner Brothers or DC saw either. You know, we've heard his story about how he had a whole plan for how everything was going to go. But we don't know if it really would have been great or if it would have been like another 3-hour saga where everybody's moving in slow motion. And I'm not like, you know, saying anything's really bad. You know, it was good. But it was just, I think it was too long and it was drawn out and it didn't need to be. And I think that there's a reason sometimes that executives say no. And I don't think that they've made all the right calls. And I think that they did kind of, mess up with him. And I think that they could have used him in a greater capacity. But I also see that turning into kind of like a George Lucas thing, where it's like, well, you got this guy who makes good movies. Let's just have him make all the movies, and whatever his vision is, let's do the vision.
Well, sure, but George Lucas is not Zack Snyder, because Zack Snyder did not create the Justice League, and he did not have his own production film studio.
No, but he had his own plan for how he wanted things to go. I'm just using that as a comparison, because people are talking about Zack Snyder with the Justice League as if he were George Lucas. Like, these are his characters. This is the story he developed. This is everything that he did. And they're right that he did develop the storyline. But, he's been pulling from comics, and some of it is his own. But I just feel like sometimes, if you're not in the room with the people who are hearing the pitch and seeing the storyboards and understanding what the vision was, maybe they made the right call. Maybe they were planning on having multiple directors because they've seen the success that happens when they do that. They had Christopher Nolan for the Dark Knight series. That was an incredible success. They had Patty Jenkins for the Wonder Woman movies. They were both very successful. And sometimes I think you can just put one person in charge of developing these characters and getting them, to be fully fleshed out and best version of who they should be. And then you can have someone else who pulls them all together to build, an ensemble movie if you want to do that. But, I don't think they needed to have just Zack Snyder developing all these storylines, because the people that they've chosen so far have done a really great job with the storylines that they've developed too. And I think Aquaman was a great storyline on its own as well.
James Wan is amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I think there is merit to allowing a variety of different people to have a crack at it, to really dive deep into each character's storyline. Because if you're really focusing on one character, you have quite a bit of time to figure out who they are and who you want to portray them as in your film, or your film series even. So I don't know. I think that in that way, maybe they might have made the right call. And that's something against Zack Snyder, because I still think he's a great director. Not that he's listening, but I just...
Zach, we know you're listening.
I
stand with you. I thought your movie was great.
I do too, but I just think that they might have made the right call in deciding to diversify instead of just hanging their hat on the vision of one person.
I mean, no, I agree with you completely, and I don't think that's how they should have done it. I'm saying that they should have given him more freedom for the movies he did direct, because Marvel doesn't just... It's not like they just gave the Russo brothers the entire MCU and they were like, yeah, we trust you guys, you run with it. I mean, they gave them Captain America, and then they kind of involved the Russo brothers every time there was a Captain America movie, all the way up until Infinity War and Endgame, because of how well they did. But in between that, you had people doing Ant-Man and Spider-Man and John Francis Daly involved with Spider-Man. I mean, like, everybody brings something new and different to the table, so you can't just have one mind and one focused goal throughout the entire saga. No, of course that's not going to work. But I was just more like on the side of they kind of stifled his creativity, and Marvel's done that on the other side too. I mean, Ant-Man was supposed to be very different, and people got involved, and they pushed out that original director, who I forget his name was, but he's a very well-known director. But it was supposed to be a completely different type of movie, and it got very
Ant-Man was great.
I loved it, but they both are great. But what I'm saying is that sometimes the studio gets involved where it shouldn't, and you should kind of just trust the people that you hired to do the job. Because why else would you hire them if you didn't think they could handle it? You know what I mean?
Sometimes I think it's tough to work with creative types anyway, because everyone has an idea. You work with an artist, they know what they want, and they walk in, and you work with an artist who also happens to be enmeshed in this, nerd culture, who's passionate about comic books, but also about their art and their vision and their creativity. And then you wind up with this person who's like, I want it this way, and this is what I pictured, and it should be like this, and this. And then some of these directors, if you tell them, well, this part's good, but we're going to take that out, they'll go, no, it needs to work all together. And they'll walk right out. And those are the types of arguments that happen behind closed doors when they start to flesh out these ideas and choose who's going to be, in charge of each project. Those are the things that we never hear. And then they'll go on Entertainment Tonight and be like, well, I have this plan and they told me no. They told me they wouldn't do it. And so I walked out because if I couldn't have my vision, then I wasn't going to go through with it. And I think there's something to be said for having the integrity of keeping your original design intact, and that's fine. But I also think that that's sort of the struggle that a lot of these executives have when they're working with directors and producers and writers even, is that, there needs to be some oversight from someone who has a different background.
Yeah.
Who, understands what it takes to make a successful movie in terms of the box office, because truth be told, that's why most of these people are making movies anyways, because you want it to be a box office success, you want it to make money. And as nice as it is to have a passion project, passion projects aren't really what Marvel or DC or Disney or, Universal is all about. They're more about, we gotta do what's gonna make money.
That's when you get somebody like Rian Johnson.
What people are, what people actually want to go see, So I think that's why I'm kind of hesitant to be like, well, maybe they should have done this or that, because I wasn't involved in those conversations, and I've heard a few times about how those types of conversations often go, and it's tough to say no to someone like that. But if you just let them do whatever they want for a full 3 hours of a movie and it turns out to be a complete flop, they've wasted several $1 billion of your money.
True.
When you could have just said no to part of it.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of how I see it. I can see it from both sides as a creative person, but I can also see from a financial standpoint that just saying yes to everyone's vision isn't the best strategy. So I think that's more often than not what happens when someone goes in and says they have vision for how they want things to go, is that they're like, well, you can't have a vision for how every single movie and every single part of this movie is going to go, because you're not the only person making it.
Yeah.
And you're not the only person in charge of all these characters. So that's sorry, that was my rant.
No, great. I love when you rant and you go off like that. Well, I think when you're looking for a director, other than experience and expertise, I think it matters very much whether or not they are a fan of whatever the character is that the movie is based on.
I mean, babe, Rian Johnson
exactly
said that he was a fan.
Exactly, and that was what brought this thought to my head, because you have Rian Johnson, who directed, he did the Last Jedi. And if you're a fan of Star Wars, you grow up watching the Star Wars movies, all your favorite parts are the lightsaber battles and the ship, the dogfights in space, and, the crazy aliens and the Force, and, that's all the stuff that sticks with you. I don't know how a fan of Star Wars managed to make one of the most boring Star Wars movies to ever be put to film. Half of it was the slowest chase between two ships, the Rebels, or the Resistance and the First Order. And then the other half was Finn and Rose going off to, a casino.
Yeah.
While Rey fought with Luke on a planet while he drank milk.
Because he
didn't care.
He wasn't making a movie the fans wanted. He was making a movie that he wanted to make. That he wanted to see himself.
He could have made that movie on his own outside of Star Wars. He could have done something like that, very different, but not in the Star Wars universe, because he's a good director. I mean, didn't he do Knives Out? Was that him?
Yeah, that was fabulous.
That was fantastic.
But
that is Rian Johnson. Star Wars is not Rian Johnson's style, because the swashbuckling, adventure style, stuff like that, that just doesn't seem like his thing because he slowed it down. There was too much talking, a lot like from the prequels, and all these big moments that were built up over years, and then from the Force Awakens, all just kind of fell flat, which then left J.J. Abrams to kind of clean up that mess.
Instead of doing what he wanted to do originally.
Instead of finishing the saga the way he originally planned, he then had to go back and fix everything and then rush to the ending that he wanted to get to, which I don't think is fair to him. And a lot of people bashed that movie and said, well, Rian Johnson was trying to be subversive and creative, and J.J. Abrams just wanted to give the fans what they wanted. Well, that's the whole point of making the movie, is you're making it for the fans. And if you're not really a fan of that series, then you shouldn't be involved. And you should be involved in a series that you are a fan of, something that you want to see put to screen, then you go do that, because what people were expecting and what people wanted, they didn't get. And I don't know, whether you want to say it was a waste of time, a waste of money, people are all petitioning still for it to be taken down and for another one to be made. Yep, that's still a thing. I don't agree with that.
Well, just let it lie.
I just think that now let's just forget about it and let's move on. And we have all these awesome shows on Disney Plus to look forward to, including The Mandalorian Season 3, which has given new life to Star Wars, I think. It's created and introduced us to all new planets and characters and completely expanded a galaxy far, far away, It's so cool and different. And it's kind of like, it's like the first of its kind, because the show feels like a video game and like a Western at the same time, Because George Lucas based it originally off of like the serialized TV shows, spaghetti westerns, and like with the samurai hints at like Darth Vader and like stuff like that.
Well, it's a space opera.
Well, yeah.
It was really kind of like a soap opera that was just in...
Yeah, he took from a lot of different things as his inspiration.
Yeah. I enjoy The Mandalorian. It is very formulaic, but...
In a good way.
Oh, yeah, okay. But... Yeah, I just had a lot of feelings about the Last Jedi when I saw it, and Rian Johnson, and I kind of knew going into it that I wasn't going to like it. And maybe I went in with the wrong attitude. I read so many interviews with Rian Johnson, with him just talking about his vision for it, and why he wanted to do the movie, and why he felt that he was the best fit for it. And that always rubbed me the wrong way too, because when you listen to J.J. Abrams talking about, why he does Star Trek or Star Wars, it's never because he feels like he has the best vision for it, or he just wants to do something new and creative. It's kind of like, well, he knows, he always is kind of relatable. He's like, I grew up with these characters, and I know them like you guys do. I'm a fan too. So I'm putting out what I know that the fans will want.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there were people who decried that, The Force Awakens as like fan service, as like, oh, you're just like capitalizing on nostalgia. But like, newsflash, that's what I wanted.
That's what most people wanted. That's why that one was so good.
That's exactly what I wanted him to do. And that's why I was so excited when they said it was going to be J.J. Abrams, because I already was very impressed with the way that he handled Star Trek, because that was another series that I really enjoyed that I think that he did really well with.
Those are great movies.
Yeah. And so...
I'm not even a big Star Trek fan, and I love them.
Yeah, and he was a big fan of that, too. He was always a big fan of science fiction, so he says. And that kind of resonated with me, is that, well, I trust you. I trust that you're not going to make something intentionally that would, upset me or the fan base. You're going to do what you think is the best, portrayal of these characters and these storylines. So, yeah, when they went with Rian Johnson, I was... horrified. And I know I really was, and I was extremely upset when they said that J.J. Abrams wasn't going to do the next one. They wanted to give someone else a chance at it. I was like, what are you thinking? That's the worst choice you could have made. And then they picked this guy who had no idea what he was doing and he was just an artist who just had this vision for how he wanted it to go. And like, no one stopped him. No one learned, I guess, from the prequels, because they were like, well, Rian Johnson, since you have a vision, let's see it come to life.
Well, because there was no leadership at Lucasfilm, really. Like, Kathleen Kennedy, and I'm not bashing her, I really could care less, but, like, she really didn't have, like, an idea of where the story should go. She just wanted to keep producing those movies. And whether it was for, monetary gain, or just because she wanted to carry on George's legacy, because I know they had worked together. Either way, doesn't really matter, but and I know I keep kissing Marvel's butt, but like, Kevin Feige has a vision. Kathleen was just kind of like, yeah, cool, that's cool, I like what J.J. Abrams is doing. Oh yeah, Ryan, you want to do that's cool too, let's just do that. And then after all the backlash and everything, she was like, okay, well, okay, let's get J.J. Abrams back and make sure that he does it the way that he had it planned before. But you need somebody up top who knows where these characters are going and where the story is going. You can't just let it free fall, because it's going to fall flat and it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be a big mess.
Well, I think that's kind of what I was saying about DC, is that you need an upper level creative executive who's kind of overseeing it. Like Disney does. Like Disney has creative executives for all of their film departments. And they have people in Pixar who are overseeing all of that. Like, not people who are just walking around on the day-to-day, like, doing animations, but they're just overseeing everything that happens.
Yeah.
And every project that gets approved gets to their desk before it goes off anywhere else. So I think that that's really what DC needs to do, is to have, and maybe they do have a creative executive doing this, and if so, then yikes, you need to find a new one.
Yeah.
But I think that they need to have, at least one person, if not a team, who's sitting down and has an understanding of how, the creative side of things works, but also understands the financial side. Someone who's not directly in the trenches, but who can see it big picture wise, who can look at these projects and determine, like, this is going to work, that's not going to work. And you can't have all of these, like, ego-ridden directors with, a vision that they can't interrupt, because if it does come to a creative executive's desk and that executive says, well, this, and this isn't good, but you're going to change this part, or we're not going to make the movie, and you decide to walk, then you're out that movie.
Yeah.
So it just seems like maybe there's, and I don't know, because I'm not in there, but it just seems like maybe there's a clash of personality. Because it seems like they keep finding these people, but then they don't really treat them the right way. You hear all these stories that come out of, the movies that Warner Brothers are putting out about the environment on the set and the way the executives act, the way, the creative people act. So it just kind of makes you feel like maybe it's not the best environment to be making films, and maybe there's just too many stubborn people trying to work together on one thing and they can't agree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I think they need like a cohesive team. And to be fair, Disney animation was very much the same for at least 15 years. After they finished the Disney Renaissance films in the 90s, they were in a creative block for so long. And that was really, no, truthfully, they were, until they brought John Lasseter on.
Well, no, I know, but it's such a shame, because there are so many movies that came out during that time that people just kind of are like, forget those movies. I love Emperor's New Groove.
Oh, I love Emperor's New Groove too.
And Atlantis. I love
and
Treasure Planet. Oh man. And everybody's like,
was Treasure Planet a Disney movie?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh man, those movies suck. It's like, what? What do you mean?
No, it's just that it's not that they're terrible movies. They just weren't an unimaginable success. Disney is used to unimaginable success. They were riding off of the high of all of those movies that did so well, that reestablished them as, the name in family movies. And then all of a sudden they're contending with, DreamWorks, that, stole Jeffrey Katzenberg right out from under them. And they had all of these they had all of these creative problems, and they had no real vision of where they wanted to go, and they were just kind of letting people do whatever they wanted and trying to, recapitalize off
You just threw your phone on the floor in rage.
They were trying to recapitalize off of the, success of their earlier films without really understanding what made them successful. And it really did take them basically borrowing people from Pixar to come over and head Disney Animation in order for them to understand what they had to do going forward. And then after that, they just had hit, and it's been continuous. So, truthfully, that's all they had to do. And I don't know who Warner Brothers can steal, but they need to find someone, because they're in the same boat. And for Disney, it lasted just as long. Because if you think about it, Warner Brothers has had quite a few good movies too with DC. It's not like every single one is a flop, but you produce enough of those flops and people stop trusting you to make good movies.
I don't think that Warner Brothers is actively trying to stomp out DC's fire, but I don't think they're doing their best to fan the flames either. Like they're just kind of like whatever about it, and it's a shame, because DC is like their biggest thing. Like, aside from Harry Potter's not putting out comic books and animateds and video games on a regular basis. Harry Potter had its time. It's done now. They have that park in Universal that I'm sure is making them a lot of money, but other than that, that's it. DC continues to do stuff. And they have their hands in every form of media. You need to care more. That's your baby. If I was Warner Brothers, that would be my baby. I would be all over it. Making sure every movie is gold. Everybody we bring in cares about the story and the characters and how it all fits, and making sure that everybody gets a fair share of the budget. And, some movies are, because some of those movies have pretty crappy quality CGI, and it's not, I don't know, it's noticeable sometimes. But everybody should get an equal share of that budget, and I think, the same care and effort should be put into DC that was put into, I don't know, Harry Potter, freaking Looney Tunes, all that stuff.
Well, the thing is that all the DC movies, regardless of whether they're like a success in terms of whether they're good or not, they're still a cash cow for Warner Brothers. So they really probably don't care that much, because they're like, we could put out a really crappy movie and people will probably still see it.
People will see it opening weekend, and then they'll learn, like, this was ass, and then they won't see it anymore, and they'll tell other people not to see it.
Maybe. But I think that they're just, I think they're just being arrogant. I think that they think that they can put out whatever they want and people are still going to go see it.
Sure.
And for the most part, they've been correct about that. Not all of those movies have been, like, a box office success, but, if you're okay with taking the bottom tier and it's enough to sustain you, you're not going to go for the top tier, because that requires a top tier budget and the time and the energy to put out a top tier movie. Whereas they could just push out a new one in like 2 years and be like, well, here you go, peasants. Take what we give you. And they're just thinking that we're just like standing there like Oliver with our hands out. Like,
can I have some more?
And it feels, that's why the Justice League felt so cheap to me as a fan. Because I was like, this is what we waited for. And you gave us this. And it made me angry, because I was like, if you had just waited another year, we would have waited another year. But if you had just given it the time that it needed, then you would have had a better movie. And you wouldn't have had fans who were upset about it. So, it really just feels like at this point, they don't care about the fans at all. They just care about making money. And they think that people are still going to go see it, whether, it's a good movie or not. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it. And I really do. I think someone needs to take over there and say enough's enough. This is what you have to do to right the ship. This is what you have to do to make sure every single movie is a success. It's
Well,
not impossible. Disney does it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
They did have The Good Dinosaur, but other than that, you know, I feel
That's
like...
Pixar.
Well, Disney Pixar, they're in a partnership.
Sure, but this is a whole other conversation, and we've talked about this before at length. But just because Disney owns Pixar, they're their distributor. I feel like
people too. But anyway, yeah.
But I don't know how much responsibility he would accept. But after he does these last two Guardians movies, the Christmas special and Guardians 3, James Gunn is going over to DC.
Is he?
Yeah, he said he had a blast working on Suicide Squad and would absolutely produce more movies for them. I personally think that somebody with his level of skill and talent, I think they should give him an executive position and put him in charge and kind of let him bring in some people from Marvel, from anywhere else where he's worked that he believes that he could find good producers and directors. That's why I said he might not want that kind of responsibility, but if they were considering it and he was open to that possibility, I think that he could really change the game for them over there. Because I don't know, I haven't spoken to one person who has said they didn't like any of the Guardians movies.
I loved the Guardians
Both of them are
movies.
fantastic, and I know that this Suicide Squad movie is going to be awesome. Just from the trailer alone. The amount of characters they've included, the style of the movie. It looks like Harley Quinn gets her own like music video scene where she's kicking the crap out of guys with flowers bursting up behind her, like coming out of nowhere. Like, it just looks insane, and it looks like a lot of fun. And it's already apparently so great that certain characters are getting spin-offs. Like, we're going to care about them this much that they're already getting spin-offs. So...
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, John Cena's character is already getting his own show.
I'm not doubting that they're doing that. I'm just saying, I don't take that as a sign that the character is going to be well-loved. I take that as a sign that some executive thought that it would be a good moneymaker. I
feel like the casting of this movie is pretty smart. They got a lot of really great actors and actresses to fill these roles, so it's going to be pretty hard not to love them.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah,
and I think he could, create some good films for them. I don't think that he's going to jump immediately from doing one movie to being in charge of the entire DC universe.
No, I know. I meant like over time. I didn't mean like right away, but it's a possibility. I don't know. He's whatever. I think he could do it.
People from Marvel, though, they can keep doing that if they want. I mean,
sure. I mean,
the people who made those original movies with the Avengers may not continue with the new Avengers and with the new characters. Maybe they'll be looking for a new adventure.
Most of those directors and producers have already moved on because all their characters are dead. Spoilers. I'm sorry. But
so maybe
Tony
DC can
and
poach
Steve
them.
and Nat, they're all gone.
They're gonna have
Bruce
to come
is
with
retired.
some money
Thor's in
they
space.
definitely don't have the Marvel money.
Well, no. We'll see. I mean, Disney. Jesus Christ. Disney is like the Empire. They have everything. They have the money they could produce these movies into the near future.
They are an empire. They're almost a monopoly.
Well, I mean, yeah.
In terms of a lot of things, a lot of properties they own.
Warner Brothers does not have the same money, but I don't know. I am all for, everybody kind of going back and forth and flip-flopping because we all want these movies to be good. Marvel movies are amazing, and I want DC movies to be just as amazing. I want to feel the way I did about a Justice League movie, the way I felt about Avengers Endgame. I want to have that moment in the theater when I see the entire Justice League all together, from freaking Martian Manhunter all the way to Hawkgirl. Like, all of them there fighting off, whatever, Brainiac, or Doomsday, or Darkseid, another big one. Like, something like, I want that moment. So, I want them to get there, and if they have to take some people from Marvel to do it, by all means, I mean, and I know it's all kind of under the same umbrella, but Lucasfilm is already trying to take Kevin Feige for a little bit, to have him do some stuff for them. But, I don't know, it's all part of the same family. Anyway, I just think it's hilarious that in an episode about nerd culture, you and I just sat here and talked about our passions and our franchises that we love, and for almost an hour. So we're gonna have to do another episode about nerd culture itself. But I think this kind of sums it up. This is nerd culture, and I think it's important to have this type of community and to have everybody enjoying these things, whether they hated it before and love it now, or they always loved it. I think it's great that everybody's kind of on the same page finally, and if not for young Angelina, for the children of the future who will be into these things, it's nice for them to live in a world where everybody just loves this stuff and they don't have to worry about hiding their Batman backpack in their locker, or worrying about, am I going to get made fun of. It's important, so that's all I have to say. I have more to say, but I'll save it for another episode.
We're almost at an hour.
We are. Do you have any closing statements you'd like to?
I think I said my piece.
Yeah. Between the two of us, we said many pieces. I do have another nerdy fact, a little nerdy tidbit that I would like to share. This has nothing to do with what we talked about, but I just thought that this was really interesting. And because I played Pac-Man a lot when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So, there are 256 levels in the original Pac-Man arcade game, which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah. But right after you start the 26th level, or the 256th level, the game glitches and the entire right side of the screen becomes text. So it's unbeatable. You can't finish it. It's like the cursed level. Like, you can't get past it. Now, I don't know. Obviously, they haven't changed it because it was an old school arcade game, so I doubt that they've fixed that now. But isn't that insane? Who even would get to that point? How many quarters? How much time? Like, it's insane.
Hours
of your life. I mean, I guess if you have the
maybe you have it in your house or something,
like the arcade cabinet. But I would think that for the Sega, the console, that version of the game would not have this glitch. But probably I don't know. Not. I don't know anybody that's gotten past level 50. So I know we sure didn't. But thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. We sure did. You can find us and follow us on Instagram at Mr. and Mrs. Nerd. You can find Angelina and discuss nerdy things with her at Spooky Sandwich 666. 3 sixes? 2 sixes? It's 2 sixes. And you can find me at JB_Visual Arts.
Or you can shoot us an email.
Do you know it off the top of your head?
NerdCast.pod, pod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Send us your suggestions, your thoughts, your opinions.
If there's anything that you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, that would be the place to send it. Or you can drop a comment in this episode, comment section of this episode, or on Instagram. But you know what? We love to hear from you guys, so whatever you want to say, just say it. Stay weird, stay passionate, and stay nerdy. Bye.